All right, get ready, because today we're going deep into the Iliad.
Wow, yeah.
You sent us a podcast episode on this epic poem, which is wild considering it's over 2,700 years
I
old.
know.
It really makes you think, how can something that old still feel so relevant?
Well, before the Iliad was ever written down, it was passed down for generations by these storytellers called rhapsodes.
Oh, wow.
Imagine like captivating audiences with these epic tales,
Yeah.
bringing them to life around fires or in like these big
Yeah,
amphitheaters.
like a direct link back to ancient Greece.
Right.
Hearing those stories in their original form must have been incredible.
Oh, absolutely.
So, before we get into the actual poem itself, can you tell us a little bit more about this oral tradition?
So oral tradition wasn't just entertainment.
Okay.
It was like a crucial part of shaping cultural identity and preserving history,
Right.
especially at a time before widespread literacy. You have
Yeah.
to think about it.
hmm
These stories were how people learned about their past, their heroes,
Yeah.
their values.
It's almost like a history book.
Exactly. It's a living history book, constantly evolving with each retelling.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
It really adds another layer to appreciating the Iliad, knowing it went through this whole other life before being written down.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about the poem.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the Iliad is about the Trojan War, but it's clearly more than just a war story.
Oh, for sure. It grapples with these huge universal themes like rage and honor and mortality.
Okay.
And you see that right from the start with Achilles.
Yeah.
His wrath isn't just some plot device.
Right.
It's like this driving force that sets everything in motion.
His grudge against Agamemnon kicks off this whole chain of events.
Exactly.
But it's interesting because when you read about Achilles' rage, it's not always so straightforward.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes you get him, and then other times he's totally overboard.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I mean, that's what makes Achilles such a fascinating character.
Okay.
And the Iliad's such a compelling story.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you easy answers or simple heroes.
Yeah.
Achilles is both incredibly powerful and deeply flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And his rage, while understandable, leads to some pretty devastating consequences for himself, but also for everyone around him.
Totally. I'm thinking of that scene where he drags Hector's body around the walls of Troy.
Oh, yeah.
It's brutal, and it's really hard to read.
Yeah.
But it also just says so much about his state of mind at that point.
It's a visceral depiction of the depths of his rage and grief.
Yeah.
But, it also raises questions about honor and vengeance.
Okay.
Like, was this a justifiable response to Patroclus's death, or did he cross the line?
Right.
The poem doesn't give us a simple answer,
Yeah.
leaving us to grapple with, the moral complexities.
Yeah, that's one of the things I find so fascinating about the Iliad. It doesn't shy away from those difficult questions.
Right.
It forces you to think critically and confront those morally ambiguous situations.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the podcast episode you sent us. I understand the hosts, Max and Riley, do a bit of role-playing to bring the story to life.
They do, yeah.
So to give our listeners a sense of that, should we try a little role-playing ourselves? Me.
You game.
I never thought you'd ask.
Uh-huh.
All right, let's give it a shot.
Okay. You be Achilles, and I'll be Agamemnon.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Let's see how this goes.
Okay.
Agamemnon, you think you can just take what's mine.
What?
I risked my life for you on the battlefield, and this is how you repay me. You steal my war prize, my honor, as if I'm nothing but a dog at your heel.
Achilles, your insolence knows no bounds.
What?
I am the king, and I will not be challenged. You may be a fierce warrior, but you are nothing without my command. Remember your place.
Whoa, okay, that got heated quickly. You really channeled Agamemnon's arrogance there.
Thanks.
But even in this short exchange, we see that clash of wills.
Bro,
right?
absolutely. This isn't just a squabble over a war prize.
Right.
This is about pride and power and the consequences of unchecked ego.
Achilles, fueled by his rage, makes a choice that will have a huge impact on the rest of the war.
He withdraws from battle, right?
Yes.
And the Greeks start losing without him. It's like his domino effect, all stemming from that initial conflict.
Precisely. And it highlights another key theme of the Iliad, the interconnectedness of choices and consequences.
Okay.
One person's actions, even someone as powerful as Achilles, can ripple outwards and affect the fate of nations.
This is already making me rethink the Iliad.
Really?
We often focus on the battles and the heroes, but it's these smaller human moments, these clashes of personality and pride that really drive the story.
They absolutely do. And that's what makes the Iliad so timeless.
Yeah.
It's not just about ancient Greece.
Mm.
It's about human nature itself.
Yeah.
The struggles we all face, the choices we make, the consequences we have to live with.
It's incredible how these seemingly small moments of clashing egos
Oh, yeah.
can have such huge ripple effects. It's like a chain reaction that changes the entire course of the war.
It really is fascinating, isn't it?
And it reminds us that even in these epic stories, it's often the human element,
Yeah.
the personal choices and flaws that drive the narrative.
For sure.
Speaking of human elements, I'm curious about how the podcast you sent us handles the portrayal of the gods.
Oh, yeah.
They play a pretty significant role in the Iliad, right?
They do. And one thing that Max and Riley highlight is how complex and nuanced their portrayal is.
Okay.
They're not just these distant, all-powerful beings.
Right.
They're very much entangled in human affairs,
Yeah.
meddling in the conflict and influencing events.
It's almost like they're playing a cosmic game with the mortals,
Yes.
using them as pawns in their own divine dramas.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, it raises all sorts of questions about fate and free will.
It does.
How much control do the characters really have over their own destinies
Right.
if the gods are constantly interfering?
Right.
It's a question that has puzzled readers for centuries.
It has.
And I don't think Homer offers any easy answers.
No, he doesn't.
He presents this world where fate and free will seem to be constantly at odds with each other.
They do. And that complexity is what makes the Iliad so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It's not a simple morality tale with clear-cut heroes and villains.
Right.
It's a story that forces us to grapple with ambiguity,
Yeah.
wrestle with some of the biggest questions about human existence.
It's fascinating, too, because the gods aren't always portrayed in a positive light.
Oh, absolutely not.
They can be petty, jealous, even downright cruel at times.
That's right. And it's a pretty unique approach compared to how gods are often depicted in other mythologies.
Okay.
Homer's gods are very human in their flaws and foibles.
Interesting.
They mirror the full spectrum of human emotion, both good and bad.
It makes them feel more relatable in a way.
It does.
Even though they're these powerful, immortal beings, their actions and motivations sometimes feel all too familiar.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes the Iliad so enduringly relevant.
Okay.
It suggests that even the gods, these figures we often put on a pedestal,
Yeah.
are subject to the same weaknesses and temptations as mortals.
Right.
It's a humbling thought.
It really is.
It reminds us that we all share this common human experience,
Yes.
regardless of our status or power.
And it also underscores the importance of human agency.
Yes.
Even in a world where the gods are constantly meddling,
Right.
the characters in the Iliad still make choices.
They do.
They still face consequences.
They do.
And they still ultimately shape their own destinies.
That's right.
You know, thinking about all these different layers of the story, I'm reminded of something that Max and Riley mentioned in their podcast.
Okay.
They pointed out that even today, we still have modern myths
Yes.
that draw on these same themes from the Iliad.
Right. It's like those ancient patterns of storytelling are hardwired into our brains.
Oh, wow.
We're still drawn to stories about heroes and villains. Good versus evil, sacrifice and redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Those themes resonate with us on a deep level, even if we don't always realize it.
It makes you realize how deeply the Iliad has influenced our culture.
It has.
Those themes, those characters, those epic struggles,
Now,
they've become part of our collective unconscious.
they really have, and I think that's one of the reasons why studying the Iliad is so rewarding.
Oh, wow.
It's not just about learning about an ancient text, it's about understanding ourselves better.
All right, I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about the women in the Iliad.
Okay.
We tend to focus so much on the warriors and the battles,
We do.
but what about the female characters?
Yeah.
What roles did they play?
That's an important point.
Yeah.
While the main narrative often centers on the men and their exploits,
Mm-hmm.
the women in the Iliad are far from passive bystanders.
Okay.
They play these complex and often tragic roles caught in the crossfire of this war,
Yeah.
often subject to the whims of fate
Right.
and the decisions of powerful men.
I'm thinking of Helen, for example.
Oh, yeah.
She's often portrayed as the cause of the war, but her story is so much more nuanced than that.
Exactly. Helen's a fascinating and complex character.
Yeah.
On one hand, she's a victim of circumstance, swept up in events beyond her control.
Right.
But on the other hand, she makes choices that have huge repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
She reminds us that even in a world dominated by men, women have agency,
Yeah.
and their actions can shape the course of history.
It makes you wonder how much control she really had over her own destiny.
Right.
Was she a pawn in the game of the gods or a woman actively shaping her own path?
That is the question, isn't it?
It's a question that has been debated for centuries.
It has.
And the Iliad doesn't offer a simple answer.
No, it leaves us to ponder those complexities
Yeah.
and draw our own conclusions.
It's so interesting how these characters from thousands of years ago
I know.
can still spark such intense debate and analysis.
It really is, and it speaks to the enduring power of the Iliad. These characters and their stories continue to resonate with us
Mm-hmm.
because they tap into something fundamental about the human experience.
And it's not just Helen who challenges our assumptions.
Right.
Think about Andromache, Hector's wife.
Oh, yes.
Her scenes are some of the most emotionally powerful in the whole poem.
They are. Andromache represents the human cost of war,
Okay.
the pain and loss that ripple outward from the battlefield.
Yeah.
She embodies the love, the loyalty, the domesticity that are threatened by the violence and chaos of war.
Right.
Her grief over Hector's death is a heart-wrenching reminder of the devastating impact of conflict,
Yeah.
not just on soldiers,
Right.
but on families and entire communities.
It's like the Iliad forces us to confront the often ignored realities of war. It's not just about glory and heroism. It's about loss,
Yes.
grief,
Right.
and the shattering of innocent lives.
And that's one of the things that makes the Iliad so powerful.
Mm.
It doesn't shy away from those difficult truths.
Yeah.
It doesn't offer easy answers or neat resolutions.
Right.
It grapples with the complexities of war,
Yeah.
the ambiguities of morality, the enduring power of human emotions.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's that willingness to delve into the darkness, to explore the full spectrum of human experience
Yes.
that keeps the Iliad relevant even after all these centuries.
I feel like
You know, as we're talking,
Yeah.
I'm realizing that the Iliad is more than just a story.
Right.
It's a cultural artifact, a window into the past, a mirror reflecting our own humanity.
I love that. It's all of those things and more. It's a testament to the power of human creativity, the enduring allure of storytelling,
Right.
and the enduring relevance of those timeless themes that continue to shape our understanding of the world.
This deep dive has already made me appreciate the Iliad on a whole new level.
I'm so glad.
It's not just an epic poem, it's a reflection of ourselves, our hopes and fears, our triumphs and tragedies.
For sure.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
All right.
The idea of the Iliad as a kind of quiz or test.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that part of the podcast where Max and Riley tested their knowledge of the poem?
I do. It was called the Retro Quiz Showdown, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fun way to engage with the material.
Yeah.
See how much detail you've really absorbed.
And it made me realize how much information is packed into the Iliad.
Oh, there's a lot.
There are so many characters and battles and speeches, intricate plot points. It can feel a bit overwhelming at times.
It can be, but that's part of what makes it so rewarding to study.
Yeah.
There's always something new to discover.
Right.
Some detail you missed before.
Okay.
Some connection you hadn't made.
Yeah.
It's a text that really rewards close reading and repeated study.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that analogy.
Uh-huh.
And I think it highlights what separates the truly great works of literature from the merely good ones. The great ones, like the Iliad, keep giving back to us, even after multiple readings.
Yeah.
They have this depth and richness that we can keep exploring for a lifetime.
This deep dive has been such a rewarding experience.
It has.
I feel like we've covered so much ground already, but there's still so much more to discuss.
There is.
I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation and uncovering even more insights.
Me too. We've only just scratched the surface of this incredible epic.
Right.
There are so many more hidden gems and fascinating interpretations to explore.
I'm excited.
Stay tuned. It's wild how those small moments of clashing egos can snowball into something so huge
I know, it's crazy.
and change the whole course of the war.
It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it really drives home the point that even in these grand epics, it's the human elements, those personal flaws and decisions that really shape the narrative.
Definitely.
Speaking of human elements, I'm curious about how the podcast handled the portrayal of the gods.
Oh, the gods.
They're a big part of the Iliad, right?
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
And one thing Max and Riley really highlighted was how complex and nuanced their portrayal is.
Interesting.
They're not just these distant, all-powerful figures.
Right.
They're very much a part of the human world.
Yeah.
Meddling, influencing events, you name it.
It's like they're playing a cosmic game with the mortals. using them as pawns in their own little divine dramas.
Yeah, a great way to put it.
It makes you think about fate and free will.
It really does.
How much control do these characters really have?
Right.
If the gods are always messing around.
Just the age-old question.
Yeah, it's a question that's puzzled people for centuries.
For sure.
And I don't think Homer gives us any easy answers either.
Not at all.
It's this world where fate and free will are constantly bumping up against each other.
It's fascinating, though, that complexity.
Yeah.
It makes the Iliad so thought-provoking.
Okay.
It's not just a simple good versus evil story.
Yeah, right.
It forces us to wrestle with these huge questions about human existence.
What's also interesting is that the gods aren't always shown in a positive light.
Oh, definitely not.
They can be petty, jealous,
Right.
downright cruel sometimes.
That's true. And Mass and Riley pointed out that this more humanized view of the gods was actually quite revolutionary for its time.
Oh, wow.
It challenges the idea of gods being these perfect, all-knowing beings.
Right?
And shows them as flawed, emotional.
Yeah, it makes them more relatable in a way.
It does.
Even though they're these immortal beings, their actions and motivations feel very human.
Totally. And that's part of what keeps the Iliad so relevant even today.
Okay.
It suggests that even the gods, those figures we put on a pedestal, are subject to the same weaknesses and temptations as us regular folks.
It's a humbling thought.
It really is.
It reminds us that we all share a common human experience.
We do.
No matter our status or power.
Yeah. And it emphasizes the importance of human choice, too.
Okay.
Even with the gods meddling.
Right.
The characters still make decisions.
Yeah.
They face the consequences.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they shape their own fate.
You know, as we talk about these different layers of the story, it reminds me of something Max and Riley mentioned in their podcast.
Oh, yeah.
They said that even now, we still have modern myths.
We do.
That draw on the same themes from the Iliad.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like these ancient storytelling patterns are ingrained in us.
Right.
We're still drawn to stories about heroes and villains.
Right.
Good versus evil, sacrifice and redemption.
Yeah.
These themes speak to us on a fundamental level, even if we don't always realize it.
It really makes you see the impact the Iliad has had on our culture.
Absolutely.
The themes, the characters, the struggles,
I'm aware.
they've become part of our collective unconscious.
They really have. And I think that's a big part of why studying the Iliad is so rewarding.
Okay.
It's not just about an ancient text. It's about understanding ourselves better.
All right, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the women in the Iliad.
Okay.
We tend to focus on the warriors and the battles.
Yeah.
But what about the female characters? What roles do they play in the story?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
While the main narrative often centers on the men and their actions,
Right.
the women in the Iliad are not just passive bystanders.
Oh, okay.
They have complex, often tragic roles,
Yeah.
caught in the middle of this war, subject to the whims of fate and the decisions of powerful men.
I'm thinking of Helen, for example.
Oh, Helen, yes.
She's often seen as the cause of the war, but her story is so much deeper than that.
Exactly. Helen is such a fascinating character.
Yeah.
On one hand, she's a victim of circumstance, swept up in events beyond her control. But on the other, she makes choices that have major consequences.
Right.
She reminds us that even in a world dominated by men, women have agency,
Right.
and their actions can shape history.
It makes you wonder how much control she really had over her own destiny.
It does.
Was she a pawn of the gods or a woman actively shaping her own path?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a question debated for centuries.
it has been.
And the Iliad doesn't offer a simple answer.
No. It leaves us to ponder the complexities.
Yeah, it's amazing how these characters from thousands of years ago can still spark such intense debate.
It really is, and I think it speaks to the enduring power of the Iliad.
Yeah.
These characters and their stories resonate with us
Okay.
because they tap into something fundamental about the human experience.
And it's not just Helen who challenges our assumptions.
No, definitely not.
Think about Andromache, Hector's wife.
Oh, Andromache, yes.
Her scenes are some of the most emotionally charged in the entire poem.
They really are powerful.
They are.
Andromache embodies the human cost of war,
Okay.
the pain and loss that extend beyond the battlefield.
Right.
She represents love, loyalty, the domestic life,
Yeah.
all threatened by the violence and chaos.
And her grief over Hector's death.
Oh, it's heart-wrenching.
It is.
It's this stark reminder of the devastating impact of conflict. Not just on soldiers, but on families, entire communities.
It's like the Iliad forces us to look at the realities of war that are often ignored.
It does.
It's not just about glory and heroism.
Sure.
It's about loss, grief.
The shattering of innocent lives.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things that makes the Iliad so powerful.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from those harsh truths.
Okay.
It doesn't offer easy answers or neat resolutions.
Right.
It grapples with the complexities of war, the ambiguities of morality, the enduring power of human emotion.
You're absolutely right. It's that willingness to go to the dark places.
Yes.
To explore the full spectrum of human experience.
That's what keeps it relevant.
Yeah.
Even after all these centuries.
You know, hearing you talk about this,
Yeah.
I'm realizing the Iliad is more than just a story.
Yeah.
It's a cultural artifact.
Right.
A window to the past. A mirror reflecting our own humanity.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's all those things and so much more.
It really is.
It's testament to human creativity.
Yeah.
The power of storytelling and the enduring relevance of these timeless themes that continue to shape how we see the world.
This deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation for the Iliad.
I'm so glad to hear that.
It's not just an epic poem, it's a reflection of us, our hopes and fears.
Absolutely.
Our triumphs and tragedies.
It really is.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to go back to something we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The idea of the Iliad as a kind of quiz or test.
Oh, the quiz, right?
Yeah. Do you remember that part where Max and Riley tested their knowledge?
I do. It was called the Retro Quiz Showdown, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a fun way to engage with the material
It is.
and see how much you actually remember.
And it made me realize how much information is packed into the Iliad.
There's a lot in there.
So many characters, battles, speeches.
I know.
Those intricate plot points, it can be overwhelming at times.
It can be, but that's part of the beauty of it.
Okay.
There's always something new to discover. Some detail you missed before,
Right.
some connection you didn't make. It's a text that rewards close reading and multiple reads.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that.
Right.
And it highlights what separates the truly great works of literature
Okay.
from the merely good ones.
Yeah.
The great ones, like the Iliad, they keep giving back to you,
Yeah.
even after multiple readings.
Right.
They have this depth and richness that you can explore for a lifetime.
This deep dive has been so rewarding.
You have.
I feel like we've covered so much,
We have.
but there's still so much more to talk about.
There is.
I can't wait to continue our conversation and uncover even more insight.
Me too. We've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
There's so many more hidden gems and fascinating interpretations to uncover.
I'm excited.
Stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Iliad. It's amazing how one poem can spark so much discussion, even after all this time.
I know, right? It really shows its staying power.
Definitely. And for this last part, I'm excited to get into some of the more nuanced things we haven't fully explored yet.
Let's do it. What's on your mind?
Well, one thing that's always gotten to me is how the Iliad portrays the gods. They're not just these distant, all-powerful beings.
Right.
They're so involved in human affairs, always meddling in the conflict and changing the course of events.
Yeah. It's like they're playing a cosmic game with humans,
Exactly.
using them as pawns for their own divine entertainment.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It really makes you question fate and free will, you know? Like if the gods are always pulling the strings, how much control do the humans really have?
It's a question that's been around forever.
I know, right?
I don't think Homer gives us a straight answer either.
No, not at all.
He creates this world where fate and free will both seem to exist,
Right.
often clashing with each other.
And that's what makes it so interesting. It's not a simple good versus evil story.
Right.
It makes us really grapple with these big existential questions.
Yeah. About destiny, choice, the limits of our control.
Exactly.
What I find interesting, too, is that the gods aren't always shown in a good light either.
Oh, definitely not.
They can be petty, jealous, even cruel at times.
It's true. And Max and Riley made a good point about this more human portrayal of the gods actually being pretty revolutionary for that time period.
Wow. Okay.
It challenges that whole idea of them as perfect, all-knowing,
Right. Yeah.
and shows them with flaws, emotions, even making mistakes.
In a way, it makes them more relatable.
It does.
Even though they're immortal, their actions and motivations sometimes feel very human.
Totally. And that's part of why the Iliad still feels so relevant today.
Yeah.
It suggests that even the gods, these figures we put on a pedestal,
Yeah.
struggle with the same weaknesses and temptations as us mortals.
It's a humbling thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes you question their authority too, right?
Okay.
Like, can we really trust their judgment if they're just flawed as us? Can we take their interference as some divine decree?
Yeah, good point.
These are the questions that the Iliad throws at us.
It definitely adds this layer of moral ambiguity.
It does.
We're not just rooting for the Greeks or Trojans.
Right.
We're also questioning the gods who are supposed to be guiding their fates.
Exactly. And that complexity is what makes the Iliad so enduring.
I agree.
It doesn't give easy answers or simple solutions. It makes us think critically and come to our own conclusions.
You know, hearing all these different interpretations and layers of meaning,
Yeah.
I'm realizing the Iliad is way more than just a war story.
Right.
It's about human nature, fate, and free will, even the nature of the divine.
Absolutely. And it's all woven into this amazing story with memorable characters,
Right.
powerful scenes, language that just grabs you.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes.
I'm so glad to hear that.
I feel like I understand the depth and complexity of the Iliad so much better now.
It's always great to see someone discover the power of this epic poem.
So, as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts?
Okay.
What's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from our exploration of the Iliad?
Don't let its reputation as a classic or the ancient setting scare you away. At its core, the Iliad is about people, their struggles, triumphs, loves, and losses. It still resonates with us today because it speaks to these timeless truths about what it means to be human.
I love that. And I'd add, don't just passively read the Iliad, experience it.
Yes.
Let yourself be drawn in by the language, the emotions, the setting,
Right.
and most importantly, let yourself be challenged by the ideas and questions it raises.
I couldn't agree more. To truly engage with the Iliad is to go on an intellectual and emotional journey.
Yeah.
It's a gift that keeps on giving. The more we study it, the more we learn not just about ancient Greece, but about ourselves.
Who knows, maybe our deep dive will inspire someone to go even further,
Right.
to explore other works that were influenced by the Iliad, to see how it shaped our culture and understanding of the world.
What a fantastic challenge.
It was a pleasure diving into the Iliad with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for this incredible work.
That's wonderful to hear. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the Iliad. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds engaged.